Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this community meeting. My apologies for the very short notice. I know that at the previous company meeting I was at, I did hear that the residents really did want to have more than 48 hours notice. So my apologies. It took, we were delayed in getting it out, the notice on Monday morning. Anyways, thank you very much for coming. And this is a meeting where there are representatives from the provincial government here to provide you some more information and answer questions that you may have with regards to the Mount Poly tailings breach. So some introductions. So my name is Jennifer McGuire. I'm the Executive Director with Regional Operations for Environmental Protection with the Ministry of Environment. And I have been here in Williams Lake since the 5th and on this file since 6:30 in the morning when the event occurred. To my left is Roger Parsonage. He's the Regional Director for Environmental Health with Interior Health Authority. And to my right is Al Hoffman, and he is the Chief Inspector with the Ministry of Energy and Mines. So what I'd like to do is just give my colleagues some opportunity to provide some information around what they are aware of, what's been going on in their respective areas of expertise, and then open it up for questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. First of all, I really appreciate the opportunity to come this evening to speak to you and update you with respect to the ongoing investigation and give you some idea of what the mine's doing at the moment. So my staff and I are responsible for health and safety at mine sites. It's a little different. WorkSafe BC looks after other industries, but we look after mines. We're also responsible for permitting mine sites, and that includes the review of tailing dam designs and operation. We're conducting an investigation. I'm leading that investigation in terms of determining what the root causes are and what contributing causes might be in play in terms of the breach and why it happened. We'll be looking at any contraventions of the Mines Act or what's called the Health and Safety and Reclamation Code for mines. So we've just started that process like in earnest in the last few days. So as you can imagine, this tailings dam has been in construction for over 20 years. So we are looking at a lot of old documents, as well as we'll be interviewing a number of people on the mine site and external to the mine site to get an idea of how this might have happened. I really can't say too much more than that because we don't want to jeopardize the investigation, and we simply don't know at this point exactly what happened, so I don't want to speculate. You may have heard that I've ordered all tailings dams in BC have to have a tailings dam inspection and a review of that inspection by an independent third party. These inspections have to be done by December, so that's a fair bit of work to do, but we think it's important. We want to make sure that there's no imminent failures at any other tailings dams across BC. And as you also have heard, the government, Minister Bennett has appointed a 3-person panel with 3 internationally recognized experts, 2 specifically in tailings dam design, and 1 other individual, Dirk Van Ziel, who's a professor at Dike, just upstream of the current breach. They're about 30% there. It'll take another couple of weeks, but the idea of this dike, it's quite a large rock structure, and the objective of that dike is to prevent any more tailings from flowing out of the breach. They're building a satellite dam, which is just adjacent to that dike, and that is an area where they're going to collect water, and so that it again doesn't flow to the breach. They're collecting now all the water that's flowing out of the tailings dam is being redirected into a series of sumps and is being contained on the property, and then the water, the supernatant, is being pumped into some existing pits on the site. You may have also heard that when the tailings left the pond area, there was a plug that was formed in front of Polly Lake, and the water level in Polly Lake is quite a bit higher than it was just prior to the breach. And it was about 1.7 meters higher. They've successfully pumped it down about 30 centimeters, and they're continuing to do that. They've got 4 pumps running. In the next week or so, they're trying to get a second line in so that they can increase the flow rate from Polly Lake and decrease that water in that lake even more. The one concern they have, of course, is they want to make sure that plug is stable because they don't want it to fail suddenly and have more tailings flush down Hazeltine Creek. I think those are the major things that they're doing right now. So I think those are the major things they're doing right now. Maybe and if you have specific questions, I can certainly try to answer them later. Do you want to go on to Roger?
So from the Ministry of Environment, we have had a boat crew on the water again today, collecting some more samples around the lake. They were taking specifically turbidity readings as well as water quality samples. They have reported that the turbidity that they found today is improved, so over what it was on the weekend, and definitely from what was seen last week. We've also received some additional analytical results from the lab. We continue to review the data as it comes in from the lab and put the results up on the ministry website. The most recent information that came back was for samples that were taken on August the 13th, and these were samples that were taken in Quesnel Lake, right at the mouth of Hazeltine Creek, and these results were taken at the confluence of where Hazeltine comes into Quesnel Lake, but also there's a new path or a new creek flow at Hazeltine, so there was also a sample that was taken from that location. They were taken at various depths, so one at 0.5 meters just below the surface, and 2 other samples that were 7.5 meters and then 17.5 meters deep. Those results came back with regards to drinking water. The concentrations of all measured parameters were below both BC and Health Canada drinking water guidelines, with one exception, and that was for total aluminum. Total aluminum and dissolved aluminum. That particular element is showing up through all of our data as elevated in this area. And with regards to aquatic guidelines, so these are more stringent than water quality guidelines. The all parameters that were measured, all but 3 levels, 3 parameters were below aquatic life guidelines, and again it was the total copper and dissolved aluminum and 2. So both of those parameters, which we've seen in other results, are in excess of aquatic guidelines. The ministry continues to have conversations on a daily basis with the company with regards to their plans for ongoing monitoring, long-term monitoring, as well as protection, source protection and control of the sediment or of the tailings that's on Hazeltine, and making sure that they're doing everything that they possibly can to get plans in place to stabilize Hazeltine so that it's ready for the winter and it's ready for the spring when the spring runoff comes. So those conversations are continuing. The company was ordered under the Environmental Management Act to come up with a preliminary and a comprehensive environmental impact assessment plan, of which it also required these action plans to do activities in order to stop or abate the amount of tailings that could be flushed further into Quesnel Lake. And those are the ongoing discussions that we continue to have with the company. So over to Roger.
Thank you for the opportunity. My department is leading the health review of what has happened, and my staff are providing advice to the medical health officer related to human health. And so tonight I'll be able to give you a little bit of an update as to some of the latest developments, and then we can take your questions. First, the do not use order that is for the directly impacted area, that remains in place. That hasn't changed, and we don't expect that that will change certainly in the very near future. We're continuing to review the sample results that are coming in from the Ministry of Environment, and we're comparing those results to the guidelines for Canadian drinking water quality. And in particular, we've been looking for some of the key heavy metals that would be of a potential concern in mine tailings, looking for those in the data that's coming back. I'll say first, to just clarify some of the difference in the guidelines. There are guidelines that are related to health considerations, and there's guidelines related to aesthetic use. So some of the parameters are a health risk if they're exceeded. Other parameters, while they're not a health risk, would create aesthetic concerns for the use of drinking water. So something like iron, for example, and manganese is not going to cause a human health effect, but it is an aesthetic effect. And so as we continue to see the results out of Quesnel Lake, we are not seeing any exceedances of parameters that would cause a human health concern. There are a couple, iron and manganese in particular, that we are seeing in some of the samples, but those are aesthetic guidelines. They are not human health guidelines. So our continued review of the data to date continues to validate our conclusion that the water in Quesnel Lake was not ever exposed to unsafe levels of contaminants from a human health perspective. Now, having said that, on Saturday we put out a public service announcement related to the quality of Quesnel Lake, advising people based on information that we had gotten Friday and into Saturday that it appeared that the quality of Quesnel Lake was changing, and we were hearing reports of sediment that some people were noticing. And so our advice to people, if they are noticing a change in their quality, particularly if they're seeing turbidity or suspended sediment, but also if you're seeing changes to color or odor, then you should consider using an alternate source. Now, this is consistent what we would always tell people who are drinking surface water, which includes springs and shallow groundwater, is that we do not recommend that people drink untreated surface water. And we certainly don't recommend that people drink cloudy water. Now, it's difficult to give advice and to generalize in a way that would apply to every situation. So what I will also say is that we recognize that people use water differently. The risks are different based on who's drinking it, as well as the characteristics of the source. And my staff are always available to talk to you individually about your situation and give you advice that is specific to your situation. And so with that, I'll pass it back to Jennifer.
So we'll open it up for questions.
I have a question. I can speak loud enough. Where's fisheries?
As in Department of Fisheries and
Yes,
Oceans?
Of course.
So this is a provincial, this
Well, it
is,
doesn't matter what it is. Out on the lake right now where I'm living, I've been watching the weeds are growing off the bottom, and they all have a film on it, which means that this stuff that's coming down is bonding and sticking to all of the plants, which to me, fisheries should be here to address that are not the fish coming up and all of the minnows or whatever flies in the lake, is that not going to go through their gills and affect the meat and the fish? Right, that's my first question. I do have a few more, which I might as well get them off my chest. Number one, I would really like to know, how is it that the government can step in and deny me access to a territory, and I love that word, the territory that I've been using for 33 years, they've decided that I can't go in there. And why? Because of safety. But everything that I hear, the water's safe, everything is safe, yet the public is denied access to that whole area down there. I really think someone has to be, and stand up and be counted for that. And as far as I can see, if you talk to people, they kind of shove you off a little bit, and they assume that we have no rights. And the way the government is acting, I would say they are right. We have no rights left. Between the government and the big mines and other corporations, we do what they want us to do.
okay, so your question is about access into the Hazeltine
No,
area.
why are you allowing the mine or anyone else to tell the public what to do? What gives you the right? They made the mess. I didn't make the mess.
I guess I get this one. So the simplest answer is, excuse me. Simplest answer is when we first came out here, people said you haven't declared a local state of emergency. And we didn't do that because we didn't need the power to be able to restrict access, or the main reason it was brought in was the evening we thought the bridges were going to be taken out. We needed the ability to go into the river or lake with machinery to pull logs out without getting permits. Once you, and people criticize us for not doing that, so we only put in a local state of emergency to be able to act on that. At the same time, the powers that come with a local state of emergency allow us to restrict access. Access is being restricted in that area because of concern about the safety of the plug that the mining inspector just spoke of. When that area is secure and the plug is secure, local state of emergency will be removed and access will be granted back into there. And that's the power that's granted under declaring a local state of emergency.
And when's that going to be?
But that was something the mine and the mining inspector could best answer. I can't. So based on their recommendations, that's what we've done.
Okay, hold on.
He's right here, why doesn't he answer the question? He's right here.
Okay, I'd like to finish what I have to say about that. When we're talking about the flood, I was in there on day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, and I missed a week, and then I went back in and was observing the level of the water in Polly Lake. Polly Lake was never higher than it is when the spring runoff is there, ever. And and a friend of mine, we put a rock there so we could observe that. We wanted to be on the ground. We can see this. We understand that. We don't understand when somebody's feeding us a line that there's a plug there. I just bloody don't buy it, and I challenge you, and I will give my time free to go down there with you and inspect it, which, from what I've heard, no one is allowed in there but government employees. Well, I'd like to be your sidekick and carry your damn bag. take me with you so I can give you my opinion. And then I'll get back and tell the community it's right or it's wrong. But as it is, someone is always coming and saying, we have the answers. To hell, you made the mess.
Next question. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question, and it could be the same that Rich was gonna ask. We keep hearing about the plug in Polly Lake and the danger that it could flow out and create more damage. And I heard Jennifer say the largest concentration is at the mouth of Hazeltine. That's where you're getting the highest readings, right? In the localized area where the heavies are.
We had one set where we had deep station Hazeltine.
Okay.
So it was 45, 60, 90 meters deep,
Yeah.
I think, where we were getting elevated levels.
Yeah. So then I hear the minister or the inspector say, we can't do that, we've got to watch what's going on with the water. And then last Thursday at the meeting, we hear Mount Polly's pumping currently about 10,000, I think liters or gallons, gallons a minute down Hazeltine to relieve the pressure of Polly Lake. And what they want to do is increase it to 20,000 gallons a minute. And everybody seems fine with that. Why not blow the damn plug and let it go all at once? I mean, work for Mount Polly, take the pressure off the lake and do it. I just don't see it. We keep getting like one side says one thing, one side says the other.
Well, I think what they're concerned about is an uncontrolled release. If it all went down at once, we might have a near repetition of what's already happened. So,
But the lakes, or the creek, you've said it time and time again, is scoured clean. If it's scoured clean, what the hell are we worried about?
it's not scoured clean. There's still a lot of tailings deposited in the original creek bed.
Okay, so then there's my point. So now you're allowing them to wash that damn stuff out of Polly Lake down at the creek that's got all the tailings in it, and the tailings are gonna be the most caustic, toxic part of the whole damn tailings pond.
Well,
So the sample results that we just received back were actually from the discharge from Hazeltine Creek into Quesnel Lake. That's exactly why we targeted that area, because we were concerned with the amount of fluid that was water that was coming out of Polly Lake, and we were concerned that it was just gonna flush. But based upon the results that we've just gotten back this weekend,
Yeah, but that's from August 13th. What about the plume on Saturday that they discovered that's 30 to 90 meters deep and 3 degrees warmer than the rest of the lake?
right, so that's the material that's already been deposited. That's our
I'm
belief.
talking about the plume that's just on the other side of Cedar Creek and goes to Mitchell Play. So, and I mean, I can tell you, Jennifer, that this lake has, and down here by the bridge, I've only been here 8 years. But that water in the 8 years I've been here has never, spring, summer, fall, winter, never been that color.
Never been done.
And it's likely because of the tailings.
Yeah, well, we know it is,
Yes.
because we've never had it before.
Yes. So that's why we're continuing to monitor, find out how far the plume is, find out where the tailings are depositing in the lake,
Yeah.
so that we can understand what the long-term implications are, as well as make sure that we're checking the water to make sure that it's safe for human use.
They know where the tailings are going already.
So is there another question in the back, please?
I have a question here in the back. First off, thank you for taking the questions and facing this out. One of the questions that I have, actually I have 3 questions. The first one is, you mentioned that there wasn't a whole lot of toxicity, but you had mentioned high levels of aluminum, and aluminum is known to be cancer-causing, especially in adrenals and the liver. So that's one question. The other thing is that the toxic sludge that's in there, we've heard reports of people that have been standing in it and waiting in it and been there firsthand. And it sounds like there hasn't been much in the way of any efforts to remove that toxic sludge. It's always talk about the water condition, and I would think that condition would change periodically depending on the weather. So my question is, what efforts are being taken to remove that sludge that's in Polly Lake and all along the surrounding areas? I know that Hazelton used to have coho running there. I don't know if that's probably not going to happen anymore. But aside from removing the sludge, is Polly relying on the spring runoff and Mother Nature mainly as the main cleanup? I know that we keep hearing about pumping the lake out, but what would have been the long-term plan for the tailings? Would it be a slow leaching process? And what makes it okay now that it's burst through just to keep on running everything down in through the main river streams?
So before Jennifer responds to this second and third part of your question, I'll address the aluminum, because as Jennifer indicated, these latest results and previous results before that have shown that there is high aluminum. But the Canadian drinking water qualities don't have a health-based guideline for aluminum in untreated water. So there is a guideline for aluminum, but it only applies in cases where somebody is filtering the water using an aluminum-based flocculant to assist with the filtration. Aluminum from drinking water is not an important contributor. People get far more out of diet. And so the aluminum guideline is not a health-based guideline based on consumption.
So with regards to the question about toxic sludge, so the material is tailings. And we do have and have released a sample result of the tailings, because we did take a sediment or a tailings sample, both in Hazeltine Creek, and then we took another one in the lake for just a baseline comparison. Those results were released on August the 15th, and there were three parameters of concern that were elevated. It was copper, it's a copper mine, iron, and nickel. The parameters that were identified were to be expected, being that it was tailings. With regards to your comment about, I'll just talk a little bit more about toxicity.
I just wanted to say with the to be expected with what it is. We know what it is, but to know what it is and then say it's okay.
I didn't say it's okay. I said we know what it is.
Before that, the water samples were okay to drink.
And the water samples are okay to drink.
And they would vary all the time depending on the turbulence and the weather runoff.
We all get cancer, we can be liable.
So I'll finish the answer to the question. The other piece around toxicity, it was, I think it was the 5th, we took an LC50, so a toxicity sample, for the purposes of determining whether or not the water was toxic, and it was not. So there was 100% pass with regards to that toxicity test. The question you had with regards to the flush of sediments, this is of concern to the ministry as well. We want to make sure that the mine is doing everything possible, and they have plans in place to reduce the the flow of any additional sediment tailings into the creek. This is why an order was issued under the Environmental Management Act, and this is why we are in daily conversations with the mine about their plans for how they are going to remediate, collect, mitigate the tailings deposit that is in Hazeltine Creek, plus the material which has been deposited now at the mouth.
Who's doing the assessments?
Sorry, who's doing the assessments?
Yeah.
So the ministry is taking samples, the company is taking samples. We have a science panel which has been established to provide some neutrality UNBC, UBC. There are other academics which are participating in that science panel and providing advice around long-term monitoring. We have an environmental working group where there are representatives from the Williams Lake and the Soda Creek Indian bands also providing advice. And my friend who is standing up getting ready to ask the next question has also been engaged in some of those conversations. Over to you, Richard.
Thanks very much, Jennifer, and thanks for coming out. And thanks for Chief Ann Lilly and Beth Summers to be with us here today as well. And thank all of you as well for being here. I've got a series of questions, and you can feel free to wrestle the mic away from me if I drag on here a bit, but there's a lot to be asked, and there's certainly a lot of answers that need to be provided. My first question that goes right back to the mining inspector. You were talking about decommissioned mines being inspected. Does that include abandoned mines as well, and who's paying the cost of that?
We're starting with the mines that were permitted, that we know exactly where they are, who's doing it. The companies that are operating those mines are expected to foot the cost of those tailing dam inspections, as well as the independent review that will follow once the inspection is completed.
So the question then will be, are you going to inspect abandoned mines and ponds?
Well, certainly that's in our plan in the long term. We do that on a risks basis, and we do that. I can't give you a promise on exactly how many will be done, but it's done on a risk basis, and we're doing that now.
And I'm assuming that some of these are unmonitored then? Wouldn't you think that the unmonitored tailings facilities be the ones that you might want to check as well?
Exactly. So there are, as you say, there are some historic abandoned mines in the province, and we can't look at them all at once or in 1 year, but certainly some of our consultant inspectors are going out and looking at those as well.
Question 2, and I'm not sure who can answer this. Obviously, the Mount Holly Mining Corporation is out there gathering their own data. How can the people in this room access that data? They are outside the licensed area. They're in very public and First Nations territory. That information should be available to everybody in this room. How can that happen?
Have you asked the mine?
I've asked them right now.
That's not funny.
You know, I'll ask the mine right now. They're here. How can we access the information from Mount Holly Mining Corporation? Steve? Okay, very good.
And as a personal thing, I've been contacted by the mine, by your son, Gabe, and by the mine to say, if you want to know what the testing has been done at your intake on the lake, I can email them, and I have emailed them, and I've gotten answers. That's a personal thing.
Thanks for that, Kim. But we would like to go beyond that. We'd like to know all of your information, not just drinking water. Everything that's being collected. Okay, yeah, we'd like full disclosure.
So, Richard, I agree. I'm very I anticipate that the mine will be making full disclosure of all of the information that they've collected, because it's necessary for both the mine and for the ministry and the science panel to understand all of the sample results that have been collected, so that we can correctly determine what needs to be done with regards to long-term monitoring. So it's a vital piece of information. I know that there have been multiple crews hired by the mine, local folks who are familiar with Quesnel Lake, former MOE employees who have been hired that are out there collecting data. So we're looking forward to looking at that information at the science panel.
Well, go ahead.
And I will add that we have asked the mine to provide us, particularly with the drinking water results. We are offering people that do get their water tested, if you want to go over the results and have some understanding of what they mean and how they compare to the guidelines, we would be happy to do that.
Well, on the topic then of drinking water, which obviously the people in this room are very concerned about their drinking water, and we appreciate your comments to say that it's fine, but People are having a hard time digesting that, so to speak. I'd like to know why water is not being delivered. These people are used to turning the tap on. Why are they going up to Spanish Mountain, or why are they going downtown, jumping in their vehicles to go get water?
And who's gonna cover the fuel cost?
Exactly. Why isn't water being delivered?
Offer vouchers.
And further to that, for those that are very suspicious of the water, and perhaps rightly so, and we'll get to that in a moment, I would suggest that the mining company start drilling wells for people that live on the lake and draw their water on the lake. And that's entirely up to them if they choose to do that. But it might be a very good goodwill gesture to start letting people have some trust in this moving forward. So my question is, why isn't drinking water being delivered?
So we reduced the area that was covered by the do not use order. So very early in the event, when we didn't know what was in those tailings and didn't know what the impact was going to be on Quesnel Lake, out of caution, the do not use notice was applied to the entire area. Now that we have reviewed a lot more sample results, we have a much better understanding of what was in the tailings and the impact on Quesnel Lake. As I said earlier, we have no reason to believe that the lake was ever subject to contamination from a health perspective. So there were no metals or no constituents in those tailings that got into Quesnel Lake at levels that would cause a health concern.
Okay, that leads into my next series of questions. Why isn't deeper sampling being done? I know we're going down to 90 meters at the moment, but the lake is 540 meters deep. And as many in the room know, and I'm sure some at the front know, the lake is very interesting in the fact that it cycles water in a very big way. And that was brought to light several years ago when the water temperature at the outlet of Quesnel Lake changed by 8 degrees in one day. And I'm going to offer that it's not just water temperature that changes by 8 degrees in one day, it's the composition of the water that changes as well. And further to that, my question would be, in view of what I've just said, why was there no weekend sampling undertaken by the Ministry of Environment?
Our boat crew were not on the water this weekend. We had sufficient samples to inform the actions that need to be done. The company did have boat crews on the water this weekend, and we felt that that was sufficient.
And finally, I guess my last question is 90 meters, is that as far as the sampling is going to go? I don't understand why we're not going deeper. I'm quite aware of what can happen. There's very good possibilities of getting samples at the bottom of the lake.
There's additional equipment that needs to be brought in. The ministry equipment only goes that deep. We know that there's a DFO boat that should be coming up soon or be in the neighborhood now. I know that the mine has retained an outfit from the States who have specialized equipment that will be able to do deeper monitoring. This is all something that's being discussed at the science panel. So yes, it is on the radar. Yes, we will be doing it when we get the appropriate equipment.
I thought the First Nations had an involvement in the science panel, and this is news to me that there's an ROV, a remote operational vessel being brought in. I'm assuming that's what we're talking about? I don't know anything about
I don't think it's an ROV, no, and I just learned about this today.
Well, we haven't, so thanks for that, Jennifer. Yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for now, but I really want to urge the company and the government to hold them to task. And this watershed provided an awful lot of money to the government over the last 40 years that I've been here. When you talk about fishing, the Fraser River, the logging that came out of here, the timber, the mines, hundreds of millions of dollars, perhaps billions of dollars. And all we're trying to do is get drinking water to these people. I'm starting to not have a lot of faith. I'm starting to have not a lot of faith in what we're doing moving forward if we can't even solve these small issues of drinking water to satisfy these folks in this room. $200,000, you have these people with wells. And yet people are digging their heels in already. And I'm really afraid of this going forward. It's going to be a real battle to make sure things get done properly. Thanks very much.
Hi, Richard already anticipated most of my questions, but I still have one in my mind. You spoke about not drinking the water if it's not clear or if it looks strange or smells strange. And your young friend beside you said, well, you should find an alternate source of water. Where am I to find that alternate source of water?
So as I said earlier, it's difficult to generalize because it does depend a lot.
I don't want a generalization. I want a specific. Where do I find drinking water?
The water in Quesnel Lake, in terms of heavy metals, is safe.
But you just
Now,
said we
our-
shouldn't drink it if it is cloudy or looks strange or smells funny.
Our advice is twofold, and this is, I want to stress that this is advice that we give all the time. It is not unique to this particular situation, but this is advice that we always give people when it comes to surface water. You should not drink untreated surface water. It's a health risk.
My dear,
You should
I've been
not drink.
drinking this water from the lake for 35 years. All of a sudden, I can't drink it. Where do I go for the alternative water source?
The second part of our advice is that if the quality changes, particularly if it gets cloudy, we would not recommend drinking it. Now, in terms of an alternate source,
It's raining right now.
basic filtration will remove the sediment.
Is anyone offering to provide basic filtration to me?
Can I answer that question?
Sure.
2 weeks ago, we had a community meeting here. We had about 125, 130 people come out. As Richard alluded to, the number one response that I gave to Wes to get an answer back from Mount Poly was provide drilled wells or a water purification system for the people that are directly affected taking the water out of the lake. And I can tell you to this date and this time, whatever time it is right now, I haven't heard a damn thing back.
Of course not.
So that's the number one issue. And I go back to my other question, and you just reiterated the same thing I asked. You said, we want to stop the water and everything else from bringing the tailings down Hazeltine, and they're going to want to pump 20,000 gallons down there a minute. Don't you see the inequity of those two comments?
Yes, I do see the inequity. However, the other part that I didn't share is that in order for the mine to proceed with that increased pumping, we have asked for additional source control at the mouth of Hazeltine in the form of silt fences, other types of installing and putting in place in order to contain the tailings in the silt.
Yep.
And the mine has said that they would be putting silt fences, hanging them off of booms and other things like that. That's again what they've been discussing with us. So they have not increased the discharge rate coming down Hazeltine, and it's conditional upon them doing that.
I guess our concern.
They were putting more pumps in.
Yeah.
What about
the
filters
minister
on the
just
pumps?
said, you said that they're gonna increase the pump rate. So we're getting this, BS, sort of the shell game, oh, watch this and watch this one. And what we're saying is, the reason they don't wanna pump the damn water up back in the Springer pit, or into one of the other pits, is because they said last Thursday, we don't have the horsepower. Well, I can tell you, damn placer miners around here have been pumping water uphill for a long time, and they don't have nearly the bankroll that Mount Poly does. Tell them to reach into their pocket, spend a little goddamn money, and pump it up the hill, not down Hazeltine Creek.
I would like to pass the microphone to Chief Louie, and I hope she gets a more satisfactory answer than I have gotten. Thank you.
When I was here last week, I expressed concern regarding the increased pumping down Hazeltine Creek, and I asked about the sludge testing at that time because if you increase the flow, you're gonna start taking some of those chemicals down Hazeltine Creek, and yet it's being allowed to occur. Like, and you guys are sitting up there telling these people that this water is safe. What about the sediments? I kept saying that last week. That needs, you can't allow people to pump more water and take the sediments down and sit there and tell them to drink water out of Quesnel Lake when it's not safe. You know, I don't see any of you sitting there drinking it. The other thing was, in the media in the last couple of days, there were comments made about some of the individual homes that had E. coli, etc. in their systems. Tom Henke last week was asking for Mount Poly Mines to pay for his baseline to be tested again, and they would not answer properly until there was harassment from the crowd, and there was a maybe. Like, are they going to pay for those people to have their systems tested? That's what needs to be done. They're the ones that reside here, they're the ones that have to drink water, and yet the mine is refusing to deliver water. They're getting it for two times a day on a limited hourly basis. That's unfair to the people, because the mine made the mess. They should be accountable. They should be providing the water to them and doing the proper testing to the individual homes where they draw their water out of the lake.
Everybody's talking about pumping the water.
Can't hear you.
Hold it closer to you. No, just closer to your mouth.
They're talking about pumping the water out of Polly up into the pits.
Can't hear you.
There's one pit, it's the Springer pit. It wouldn't take a day to fill it up.
Yeah. There.
It would not take a day to fill that. Speak up. There's a very limited area in the Springer pit. The water of the Polly Lake would plug it up in a day if they pump. They need that room to pump from the tailings then into the pit. I worked there from day one. I know what it's like. I worked on the dam on day one when we stripped it. They can't pump from Polly into that pit.
I'll take a turn. I have one big question that has crossed my mind from day one is why the hell don't we leave Polly alone? Because Polly, when it's runoff, is at the level they claim that we're in great danger of everything breaking loose and killing us all. What the hell? It's already happened. Why don't we just leave it alone and let nature take care of it? Because the minute we step in, we seem to screw it up. So why don't we just leave it alone? And if we're pumping it into the Hazeltine, I would like to see where in the hell the outlet's going. And again, I'm going to say again, gee, I'd sure like to go down there and see exactly where the hell's the water going. They're pumping out of Polly. It was never dirty that I saw. I never saw any dirt in there. There's fish in there. Everything seemed to be fine. Why the hell do they want to play with Polly? And I've said it time and time again. How about the government answering the bloody question? Thanks very much.
Well, I think what the company's trying to do is balance the risk of putting some additional, which is essentially clean water, from Polly Lake down Hazelton Creek versus, as I said before, the danger of an unreleased catastrophic release from that plug. And that's what they're doing. So I think they're doing the right thing for now.
Well, then don't you think that perhaps it would be a good thing, and I mean, I really don't need a vote of confidence to know what I'm thinking of, but Jesus, why the hell don't you take me down there and stand me on the shore and tell me, look, Lionel, there it is. And then when I come back and say, hey guys, I had my feet in the bloody thing and it was fine. But no, we have to come here and we have to be told what everyone's supposed to be doing, not what are they doing. Tell me, where's the discharge? Is it after the sludge that's on the other side of it? Where is that exactly?
I don't know if there's anyone from the company here, but it's about maybe between 500 meters and a kilometer.
Steve is there.
He'll talk tomorrow.
I'll give my presentation tomorrow, I'll let you guys.
So it's between, I'd say, 500 meters and a
Wait for the
kilometer
camera.
downstream of the breach. And I've seen the water being pumped out, it's clear. I don't see any concern with it.
I thought that was from the discharge of Polly, the increased discharge, no?
No, it's not from the discharge from Polly Lake into Hazeltine, because we've got samples at the mouth of Hazeltine going into Quesnel Lake, and that's not turbid.
So do you have an answer to what the increased turbidity is in the water since Friday? Did a big change?
As of last week, we knew the boat crew had reported that the thermocline had changed and that there was some increased stratification happening in the lake. Why? We don't know. It's stratified layers, so it was turbid, clear, turbid, clear, turbid.
In my experience.
But I heard from a worker that was taking samples.
Sorry,
They're
one.
still running stuff down there.
I heard from a worker at Polly today that was taking samples that turbidity was increasing all the time, and it was.
Yeah, so the question was that around turbidity increasing. So the results that we've taken, we're seeing that there is increased turbidity at depth. And then we saw that over the weekend, as everyone saw, there was turbidity that came to surface. And again, today, the boat crew has reported that around Mitchell Bay and around Cedar Point, the turbidity has lessened a bit, although it's still there, but it's not as prevalent as it was last week.
We don't know where that's coming
We don't understand why, no.
White Kanahu Spassky request Amutna Khalaut Nasukhot Makulu. White, greetings everybody. My name's Kanahu Spassky, it means red woman. In Tanaka, I'm from Nisgawnlid, Secwepemc Nation. This is a part of our communal territory here. And I'm here and I've been camped at the entrance to the Mount Polly mine site. This area is called Yuh Nesenchametqua. It's a powerful place, and it impacts so much of our people and our salmon and our water. Some of the questions that I want to ask is that raw data available for our own interpretation? We need to have that raw data for us to interpret it as an independent environmental monitoring body. What's coming out of this camp is a lot of information from employees, residents, and local Secwepemc and their concerns. One of the things is the recent Chilcotin decision, and that has there been consent or free and prior informed consent on any of the permits that you are issuing on the discharge of the waters, what permits and who are issuing the permits from the province to Imperial Metals. We need to have those permits because what they're doing in entering those tailings and pumping, it's not spilling, they're pumping it into Hazeltine Creek right now. We visited that creek and we went to go do a ceremony there with a group of women with our offerings and our prayers. And to me, there's no way that you could get in anywhere there to get in any heavy machinery or to clean up anything. You're saying that you're damming up the silt, but we don't see that happening. There's animals going in there, and there's tracks, there's moose tracks, grizzly bear tracks, caribou tracks, all going into that Hazeltine Creek area. I was actually sucked right into the sludge. It's very unstable. I cut myself open going there, and it's very unstable, and it's a very deep concern to our people that the sludge is still there. What happens with the rainfall that just happened right now, we saw how much rain just came down. What happens when that hits that sludge and goes down into the Quesnel River, and that's the Fraser River watershed. 63% of British Columbia depends on that Fraser River watershed. This needs to be a public outcry, not only here in Likely and within the Secwepemc Nation, but everyone that depends on that Fraser River watershed. And I don't feel that there's not proper information coming out to the public, And that's why we were set up there at that camp, is to get the proper information to our people. We set up a Facebook page. It has over 36,000 views so far. And we set it up maybe 3 days after we set up the camp. This fire's been going for 9 days. And it's powerful. It's bringing the people together. So much donations coming in to feed the people there to keep this camp going, because people have hope in this fire. Because they say that there's no answers from industry, Imperial Metals, or the government on this. And my question is the consent, and who's issuing these permits, and what permits have you issued through the province to Imperial Metals post-spill?
So with regards to your question about data, so the ministry has been posting on our website all of the data. So with a bio memo and then a table and all the raw data that we've been receiving from the labs. We've also been sharing that information recently with Williams Lake and Soda Creek Indian bands. If you want me to share it with you, I can share it with you as well every time the data comes out. With regards to decisions, I know that the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations under the Water Act has issued an order to the company to address the debris collection in Hazeltine. And it's my understanding that there was some conversation with Williams Lake Indian Band, and I'm not certain, Chief Bev Sellers, whether or not there was a touch base with Soda Creek, but I know that there was a touch base with Williams Lake with regards to that order. There has been no permit issued under the Environmental Management Act for the discharge of water out of Polly Lake. It's covered under the Water Act.
Again, there have been no additional permits issued from the Mines Act, and certainly if the mine were to rebuild the tailings dam, it would require a Mines Act permit amendment, and First Nations would definitely be consulted in terms of that permit.
Oh, so you talk about the debris, but what about the sludge? What about the tailings?
The tailings? A permit for the tailings?
No, I'm talking about, you talked about the debris. There was some agreement about cleaning up the debris, but what about the sludge? Is that included in this debris?
Okay. Oh, so the order that was issued under the Water Act was for dealing with the water level in Polly Lake and collecting all of the woody debris, and the order allowed the company to do works in about the stream. For cleaning up all of the for cleaning up Hazeltine Creek, it's covered under the order under the environmental management. Oh, sorry, my apologies. There was an order that was issued on the 5th of August, 6th of August, to the company to compel them to clean it up.
So Imperial Metals does not have our consent to discharge into Hazelton Creek. It has no consent to dump that sludge and the rest of whatever it has in Polly Lake into the creek. It does not have our consent. So why are, who is the enforcement body? Who's the one that's going to enforce this? That we do not want it dumped. We don't want it pumped. It's being pumped right now out of Polly Lake, and we do not give our consent.
So I'm gonna just get things straight here, because I don't know that much about mining, but being camped out over the last week or so, I've been learning a little bit here. So I just want to get it straight, and you can let me know if I've got it right or not. So to my understanding, the water testing samples are being taken from the edges of Polly Lake. Is that right? No water testing is being taken out on boats onto Polly Lake because of safety. Is that correct?
One helicopter sample.
There were 2 samples that were taken from Polly Lake There was a sample that was taken from the discharge, so the pipe that's going into Hazeltine
No, I mean
Creek.
the lake itself, though.
Right, there were only 2 samples that were taken of the water in Polly Lake.
Okay, so to my understanding, what's happening is that no water samples are being taken from the actual lake itself. Folks who are working in the environmental industry or whatever are taking samples from the edges, the shores of the lake, and the reason being is because of safety issues, right? There's a dam, it could break any time. That dam is a plug created by debris. And if that dam breaks, then that's a safety concern for workers that are going to be on the lake. Right, okay. So then moving forward from there, if no samples are being taken from the lake itself and the mine is currently pumping out that lake into Hazeltine Creek, down to Quesnel Lake. So we don't know how toxic Polly Lake is, but to find out how toxic it is, we're just going to pump it all down Hazeltine Creek, into Quesnel Lake, into the river, and down into the Fraser River as well. Is that what's happening?
No. There were 2 samples that were taken out of Polly Lake. There have been 1, if not 2 samples that were taken from the pipe that comes out of Hazeltine Creek and goes out of Polly Lake and into Hazeltine Creek. So before the water even gets into Hazeltine Creek, there were some more samples that were taken.
But I'm asking, the water is being pumped
Yes,
from Polly Lake
through a pipe.
into Hazeltine Creek,
Correct.
down to Quesnel Lake.
And there was a sample that was taken at the point where the water comes out of the pipe.
Sure. I'm not particularly asking, let's say, about how many samples are taken, because I know it's insufficient. What I am asking is sort of the complete absurdity of, well, we don't know how toxic Polly Lake is, but to find out how toxic Polly Lake is, we're going to pump it all down to Hazeltine Creek, down to Quesnel Lake, and we're not going to test deep into Quesnel Lake either. That's what's going on, right?
I think you need to look at the data. All the data that we've received to date, including the toxicity results, confirm that it is not toxic to rainbow trout when an LC50 was done. The sample results that have come back for Polly Lake, the discharge from Hazeltine Creek, and other samples that are in Quesnel Lake are showing that we are getting some exceedances, but it's nothing that is causing a concern from a drinking water perspective other than the turbidity. We have taken samples of sediment, and those are the places where there are some higher levels of copper, nickel, and iron.
So in terms of the higher levels then of copper, nickel, and iron, there's a lot of science behind salmon and how salmon spawn and refine their spawning grounds. Now copper, if there's too much copper in the water, what's going to happen to the salmon is they're not going to be able to find their spawning grounds, and that spawning ground, which is one of the largest in all of the world, in all of North America, that's gone. But the trout's okay.
Sorry, what's the question?
Oh, is the trout okay, but the salmon's not? Like I'm asking about, so you're saying there's elevated copper levels, but the trout's fine. But I'm asking about the salmon, and there's science behind salmon not being able to refine their spawning grounds and recreate the same millions and millions of spawn that do happen down this river. Any comment on that? Because the trout's okay, but I haven't heard anything about the salmon. You're saying there's elevated copper levels, so I would conclude, by what I know about salmon, that that spawning ground is now destroyed.
So the earlier comment with regards to Department of Fisheries and Oceans, I think that that's definitely a question for them, and I can forward it to them and your contact information. I am not a fisheries biologist.
Well, I think that's it for now.
What? My name is Arnie Jack. I'm part of the Williams Lake Indian Band. And on Monday, we had a community meeting in Sugarcane, and I keep hearing that the water is good. The water is no good. The water is good. The water is no good. I'm confused. Is anyone else confused as to whether or not this water is good to drink? I'm confused. And the old Indian in me, it's very practical. And if I see somebody taking a drink of that water, maybe I'll believe that it's okay. It's a lesson in practicality here, I think. That I don't believe the ramifications of this breach as it's been portrayed in the media, or the lack of media. And I don't believe that the people who are answering the questions are being very truthful. And I'm very upset because I can't understand you, and you're supposed to be the authority in a Canadian democracy. It's you sitting there, and you're telling me that the water is good and it's not good. It's good for the trout, but it's not good for the salmon, or I don't know, I'm all confused. I'm very internet capable myself, and I can't figure out heads or tails of this situation. So I want to say that when you guys have these meetings out here in Likely, and these guys come out to push their propaganda, these media stunts that they pull, and they say that we're the ones doing the media stunts, it's them. They're not telling the truth about what's going on in that lake right now. The last results posted on the internet were from August 13th. It's been 14 days. Why aren't these samples on the internet every day? The samples every day. If you can't do that, then at least drink the water that's put in front of you. It comes right from this water source here. You, sir, that smirk on your face, I don't know what it is. But I'd like you to have a drink of that Mount Polly Joe. And I'd like Likely people to think that every time they come out here to push their propaganda, ask them to drink the water every time they come out here. And you'll see, in our language, it's manek. They're full of manek. And that's all I have to say. Will you drink the water? I'd like to hear from each one of you sitting up there. Yes, I don't, and the same as Monday. I don't need a very long response. I don't understand $75 an hour words. I don't understand $100 words. I understand yes and I understand no. Is that water in front of you safe to drink? Will you drink it?
So it's a health question, so I'll take a stab at answering it.
How about a drink?
When the mine breach happened, we were concerned about some of the things that you would be concerned about, which is heavy metals. Are there heavy metals in the tailings pond? Did those come down? Did they impact Quesnel Lake? We've been looking at the sample results as they've come in, looking for the particular heavy metals that would potentially be a concern with the mining operation. We are not seeing levels of those in Quesnel Lake
Could you answer the
at
question?
levels that would make at levels that would cause a health risk.
Could you answer that question just as you posed it? Were there heavy metals in the tailings pond?
I'll leave that to
Well, I can tell you, if you go on to Mount Polly's 2013 environmental report to the federal government, there was about 85,343 kilograms of arsenic, about 32,000 kilograms of lead. That's just the two I remember off the top of my head.
So,
and you wonder why we're concerned? And like the fellow said here, when I turn on my tap, okay, one day it's good, one day it's not. One day it's good. Well, if it looks bad, don't drink it. Well, I'm fairly practical myself. I could figure that one out. But I want to know, if I drink it, am I going to be fine? And 10 years from now, are we going to be another Waterton where they say, oh, Jesus, sorry, we wiped out half the population of Likely, but it was on one of the days we were off, or one of the days we didn't test?
So in terms of what was in the tailings pond itself, I will defer that question to my colleagues. But what I can talk about is what we're seeing in Quesnel Lake, and we are not seeing heavy metals at levels that exceed the Canadian guidelines. We have some of the very same concerns that you do about what happens in the longer term.
Yeah, but the difference is you go home to Williams Lake, I'm here.
We are going to be part of the long-term technical group with Ministry of Environment.
Good.
To understand over the long term, whether it's 6 months from now or a year or 2 years from now, whether or not we can continue to tell you that there is not a human health risk from the water in Quesnel Lake. Now, as I said earlier, what we state generally about surface water is that there are health risks if you drink it without treatment.
When I moved here, I got my water tested, it was 98% pure from a lab in Vancouver. So,
And so the
that's
best,
as pure as the water in that bottle right in front of you.
the best advice that I can sit here and give you is to talk about what those risks are, and if you choose to, if you would like to reduce those risks, we can give you advice about how to do it.
Yeah, so we know too, water purification system, that's why we asked Mount Poly to pay for it. Why the hell would I pay for something I didn't cost?
They're the ones that messed up, they should have to, I'm sorry, they should have to give us the water, sorry, but it's true. It's their mess.
Drill the wells or put in a purification system, pay for the ongoing maintenance.
And clean up their mess. Enough monitoring, clean it up, fix it.
And so,
What are we working on?
I'd just like to say,
Monitoring does nothing.
I'd just like to say, you keep saying not to drink the surface water. A lot of these people have lived here for 10, 20, 30 years. They've drank this water their whole lives. They're probably healthier than anybody who lives in Vancouver because they've been drinking clear, pure water for so many years. And for you to walk in and say, oh, don't drink it all of a sudden because of what Mount Poly did, because they were irresponsible and didn't care, you're not offering these people a solution. Don't drink it. That's not a solution. These people rely on this water. I come up here once a year. This is where I've been coming my whole life, you know, and we drank the water growing up. And now you're saying don't drink it because it's surface water? You can't tell people who relied on this their whole lives to all of a sudden not drink it and say, oh, purify it. Why should they have to pay? Where is Mount Poly saying, yes, we screwed up? Everybody in this room knows they screwed up, but yet they're not here saying, we'll fix it. We'll provide people who are residents here a solution. And all you keep saying is don't drink the surface water. That's not good enough. These people have been doing that for decades. So
Sorry.
that's not an answer. Don't drink the surface water. The water is screwed because of what Mount Poly did, but yet nobody here is providing a solution. Don't drink the water. Why? So we can drive out of our way to go up to Spanish to get water in between the convenient hours for them?
Or have showers.
Yeah. Who wants to shower in this water? You know, it's all fine and good to say don't drink the surface water, but there's no real solution. You guys aren't offering anything, and I don't see any answers here.
Better than Mexico now?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
I agree, there's no
What are we
answers.
supposed to be doing all winter long if this doesn't reach any kind of conclusion? I spoke to one of the companies, a drilling company in Williams Lake. He's booked up till spring. So if there is no resolution to this water system problem, you know, the water quality, we're going to be running up to Spanish Mountain.
I can't hear you.
We're going to be running up to Spanish Mountain all winter long, up those roads, to get our potable water.
Oh, great.
What is the solution?
So I want to go back and really try and differentiate between what are two issues. And we have concluded, based on our review of the data, that Quesnel Lake was not ever exposed to contaminants at levels of concern from human health.
If you lived here, would you be drinking the water?
Now, our public health advice,
Yeah, just skip across
which
that, eh?
we, the,
Come down to the lake, come have a drink.
the public health advice that we always give people is that if you are drinking surface water, there is a risk of disease-causing microorganisms. That's a risk.
Yeah.
What do you define as surface water, so we know what, are we talking the surface, are we talking 50 feet, 100 feet? What is surface water?
So surface water includes lakes and streams as well as shallow groundwater and springs. So those sources are, the quality of them can change, and they are subject, or they are prone to contamination from disease-causing microorganisms. And so there is, or there can be, a human health risk if you drink that without treatment. Now, people will choose.
So, there was a bunch of chitter chatter here. So what is surface water? Is it whatever's flowing?
No, it's the whole lake, Lisa, is what he's talking. The whole lake, doesn't matter how deep you
So
go.
whether it's 100 feet or 200 feet, it's still considered as surface water?
Yeah.
Is that what I hear?
That's right, and so,
So, you would not issue a permit to anyone here to take their water out of the lake without a filtration system. Is that what I hear you saying?
we don't have the legal authority to issue you a permit. But I can,
So I don't take my water from the lakes because I'm fortunate enough to have a natural spring that
That's no
water
good.
came out, got tested. Okay, I was tested, but it's now I know it's surface water. So I have a water permit to say I have water rights for that spring. So it comes from water management, and I pay so much money for it. So I am permitted to use that water. So you're telling me that no one on the lake has a water management permit to use that water in the lake? You would not say anybody here could use that water?
that's not what we're saying.
Okay,
So your right to use the water is separate from the message that I'm trying to convey, which is related to health risk.
I
So-
understand that, but what you're saying, any surface water in the province of BC is not drinkable without a filtration system.
Yeah.
When it has turbidity, or the chance of turbidity, or,
So surface water, the quality can change, and it can be subject to contamination from disease-causing microorganisms. So what we want is for you to understand what those risks are and then make an informed decision about what you do with your water.
so what I hear you saying, that water was no good to drink in the first place?
Those health risks in terms of microorganisms were always there, that's right.
Well, we didn't have the turbidity or the silt and the sand and everything coming in, so now the water isn't safe.
It was perfectly fine before.
I know what you're coming from a scientific health perspective, but what we're trying to get across is the water right now, no, we're not gonna drink it. No, we're not gonna go in there and, well, I might swim, but I'm not gonna drink it. Because I could have a long-term, something could happen to me over a long period of time because I don't know what's in there. Whereas living here for, I don't know how many cups of water I've taken out of the lake over the years, I've been here 30 some odd years, and I think I'm still okay. But now, I'm not gonna take that risk, and that's what these people don't wanna take that risk, and that risk has changed because of what is been put into the lake. People are scared to drink the water. They're scared to use the water. So maybe the three of you don't have the solution. Yes, there is something wrong with the water. It has turbidity. No, we can't drink it. Something needs to be done for the people that live on the lake so they will feel safe to have a drink of water and to have a shower. So I don't know if the three of you can do anything about that, but I think that's a suggestion from the people here in the audience. I don't think the three of you have the answer, but we want you to know this is what they want.
What about people with pressure tanks and they're gonna get a
Sorry,
bunch
we've
of
got a
silt in
question
the
back
bottom?
here, she's been waiting for a while, so.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cheryl Edwards, and I'm from Lillooet, born and raised in Pavilion. I come here with frustration and a heavy heart and anger. I really feel for this community. I really feel for you people. I really do. Do you know, water is sacred to us. As Aboriginal First Nations people, water is vital. Water means the most to us. Without water, we would not survive. We would not live without water. What would it take? They're only asking for clean water. They didn't ask for this. They didn't, and they don't deserve it. All they want is bottled water. Can somebody deliver clean water to these people? That's not asking for much.
Okay, so we've heard Lisa, so thank you very much. Yes, we've heard. With regards to the three of us that are here, we will take that message and have a conversation with the mine about water. Bottled water is a short-term fix, and I understand the concern about winter and turbidity concerns in, within the next, going forward, because bottled water will only go so long. So we will take that message back. We will have conversation with the mine, and
how long is that going to take? Because they need water. Like, put a time limit to it. They need water to drink here in this community.
right. So I know that the mine has made availability, and I know it's limited up at Spanish Mountain. We will have that conversation with the mine tomorrow. Al is on the mine site tomorrow, and we'll have a conversation with the mine. And Al and I will talk about it on the ride back into Williams Lake.
Okay, that's that question. But now I'm here again concerned about everything that's in the environment out there, all the wildlife that are out there. Their homes are getting messed up, and they're eating all of that stuff out there. And who's going to be accountable for that? Because they can't come here and speak up and hold this mic. All the deer, all the bear, the fish swimming up the rivers, the eagles. The fish, where are they going to go? Can you guys tell me where those fish are going to go? Do they have a home to go to? To continue to thrive as fish?
So the fish
You
going...
tell me that DFO isn't here? Why are they not here?
So that's my...
They need to come to this meeting.
Okay.
I want DFO sitting at this next meeting because we haven't started yet. When we get started, because we're having our meetings down there as well, and that's why I'm here. DFO needs to be at that table the next time I come up here. Because the fish can't say, what's going on? Why am I feeling this? And I can. I didn't fish. Who's going to bring fish to my table because of that spill?
So it was my error. I did not invite DFO. This was a provincial meeting. I will make sure that they come and attend a future meeting.
Thank you.
I would like to ask a question. You're talking about testing the water. Have you tested that sludge that's in Hazeltine Creek? And what is in that sludge? And then there was I saw something on the news about, there was a film on the water that was burning people. I don't know if that has been addressed or not. What was found in that sample, if it's been tested? And this turbidity has pretty much killed my pump. I can't get water out of the lake if I wanted to, because my pump is plugged. I've got a series of hoses coming to my house, to my neighbors. Is this a state of emergency or not? Did you say? Is it, the state of emergency is over? Because it would sure be nice to have showers available. I don't don't want to tell you where I had my shower, it would horrify you. But I just wondered if that soil has been tested, that sludge that's on Hazeltine Creek. And the Polly Lake, what is the health of the fish there? And that should be pumped up, not down into Quesnel Lake.
Okay, so first question around the sample of the tailings or the sludge. Yes, samples have been taken, and the results were that there were elevated copper, iron, and nickel, and those elevated parameters were signature of the tailings. So it is tailings, which is in Hazeltine Creek. Every time it rains, there is a suspicion or a good likelihood that there is some runoff that does go into Quesnel Lake, and that's why the ministry and the company has a rainy day sampling program. So the first rain after the event, the camp or the ministry was out there collecting samples on the Saturday to determine what was coming off after a rain event. The other question that you had with regards to the blue sheen. So the ministry boat crew were out and were able to collect a sample of it. I believe we collected the sample on the 12th of August. The sample was collected around floating wood debris, and it was analyzed for something called tannin and lignin. And those are signature or characteristics of decaying vegetation. So when the sample results came back, it was confirmed that there was 0.33 milligrams per liter of tannin and lignin in the sample. That is below the drinking water guideline, and the other test that was done is when the boat crew was looking at the blue sheen. So sometimes when you look at a sheen, some people might think that it looks like hydrocarbon or gas or something like that, and there's a way to distinguish between the two. If you poke at it with a stick and the sheen breaks apart, that's a sign that it's of an organic base. Versus if you poke it with a stick and then it comes back together, that means that it's a hydrocarbon. So when the boat crew was out, they poked at it and it dispersed. So we believe that the blue sheen was decaying, rotting wood with the amount of wood that came down. The other questions you had with regards to fish from Polly Lake. Okay, so we did take some fish samples from Polly Lake, and the results from both fish out of Polly Lake and fish out of Quesnel Lake, when so there were 3 parts of the fish that were analyzed: the tissue, the liver, and the gonads, and all 3 of those things were analyzed for the full suite of metals. The tissue, there were no concerns with consumption of the tissue, so the flesh of the fish out of Polly Lake or out of Quesnel Lake. There were elevated selenium concentrations in the gonad and in the liver in both fish out of Polly Lake and out of Quesnel Lake. Selenium is something which shows up over time, so it was not something that would have happened immediately from the breach. And the last question I think you had was around the state of emergency. Al, do you want to talk to that?
Okay, so the local state of emergency is something the regional district put in place to allow the powers, as I indicated before, to be able to go in should there be an emergency to remove items or material from the river, the lake, without getting a permit from DFO and go. It means we can act immediately. That wasn't the case to protect the bridge, or in fact restrict access. There's a long list of powers it gives to you. As I said, when we came on here originally, people were disappointed we hadn't done that. We don't like to do it unless there's powers needed. And so the only two powers using at the moment is one to restrict access for public safety because of the plug. And when that safety is when that information, we're told that the plug is safe and stable, we would remove the state of emergency. That would be where we're at with that, so.
So the question up here, you've been waiting.
I just had two quick questions. The thing about the blue foam, people were saying that they were getting chemical burns from it when they would touch it. How do you get chemical burns from something that's organic?
So I'll address part of that. We were hearing anecdotal secondhand reports that these burns were occurring. And we put messaging out there that if people experience those symptoms, we ask them to call us and report it. And we did not get any first-hand reports of that happening.
Okay. And I was wondering if the air's been tested, because there's been a lot of people not drinking the water and having symptoms of sickness since the tailings pond bridge.
So with regards, just looking to see who else had something to say on this topic. So with regards to air, we had some information that was brought to our attention with regards to dust, because earlier in August it was very dry and there was a concern that there was going to be tailings blowing around. I had a meteorologist and one of our other air quality specialists provide some advice and direction to the company. It then rained, and things have since settled down. With regards to, and there was a woman I met at the last Thursday, Lana, I think, who had mentioned to me something about concerns about breathing, and had given me some dates. So we've looked back at activities on the mine site. There didn't appear to be anything that was happening that would generate any type of air pollutant or contaminant that would be this far into Likely without there being immediate effects on the mine site.
I just had a question. You probably answered this and I may have missed it. It's hard to stay focused with everything the whole time. But one of the questions was in relation to the level of chemicals. We've seen the sheets that have been out with 3 of the chemicals, and I know there's a bunch of them, that are separating agents for the copper and the nickel and everything else. And I mean, does that just wash away, or is that, is that tested for within, and I know you've been focusing on the heavy metals and that's a concern. The other thing is I just want to put emphasis on the sludge and the toxicity of that needs to be cleaned up, undisputably needs to be cleaned up. If you look at the indigenous people's art, in every one of the animals, you look at the wolf, the coyote, the fox, you look at the seals, the otters, the eagles, the bear, everything has the fish in its shoulder. That's a symbol of what it eats. That's a symbol of the cycle. The human also has it in their belly most often. And we're talking about the peoples that are most closely related with the land, the protectors of the land. Obviously, with this government that's in place, there hasn't been a lot of acknowledgement to the people with selling off rivers and rights and all of this garbage. I think this is just a sample of what we're constantly facing with. So this has to be a trademark, dealt with properly situation. Otherwise, mines will use this as a cookie cutter as to what they can get away with. And this is what we've done. I think a big part of this process is they say, we haven't seen this before. We've never seen anything like this before. So it's new territory. But it's always new territory whenever there's a major spill or, the pipelines we never foresaw this with a double-hulled ship and there's oil all over the place. It seems to be like one of those things that often gets swept under the rug. I realize that everyone wants the best for the environment. It's more important to some people than others. And I think people are tired to see that big businesses always seem to to kind of get off a little bit scot-free. So I'm just emphasizing that this has to be dealt with properly in this situation, because it's precedent for what's going to go on into the rest of BC and Canada.
Just, I want to answer the question first. So the question with regards to the process chemicals, yes, so that has been raised. There, and I was flipping through my notes while you were speaking just so I could find it. So there's one called MIBC, there's another one called PAX, and there's another one that a very long name that I keep forgetting. This was raised at the Environmental Working Group. That we have working on, or that we're discussing this at. We have spoken with our lab and found out that MIBC, which is a process chemical that was used by the company up until 2009, we can sample for. We have asked for the special bottles and the preservatives and other things that need to be done. The other two chemicals, we have not found a lab in North America that can analyze it.
Or we're letting them use it?
No, they're not using it. They are not using it.
Okay, I really have to jump in. I want to know about when the state of emergency is lifted, how do we do that? Who does that? And why would it be lifted?
Okay, the local state of emergency was implemented because of the safety concerns about the plug. So when government, can I equate it to a forest fire and evacuations perhaps? So in 2010, when 29,000 square kilometers of the Caribou Regional District was under evacuation order, evacuation alert, those orders are put into place for public safety to evacuate areas, evacuate people from their homes, to provide us with the money to do that, to care for them when they wind up in. So that's what a local state of emergency does. That's one of the powers within it. When the safety concern is removed by the province and tells us that that plug is stable and there's no more concern for public safety, we would remove that local state of emergency unless there's something else that comes up that needs to be dealt with. But it's to do with people, it's to do with your safety, and that's all it's to do with. It has wide-ranging powers. For example, the night we brought it in was because of the concern locals had about the bridge being taken out. I received a number of calls about that. If we hadn't brought that state of emergency in, we wouldn't have been able to bring the excavators in, access the river, and pull the material out if we were going to save the bridge, if it was in jeopardy. Some thought it was, some thought it wasn't. In order to be able to act quickly, without having to go to DFO and get permits, we could move and do that. It gave us the power to do that. Something you use very sparingly, very judiciously, and very cautiously. If we damage fish habitat, for example, we can be made by DFO to provide additional fish habitat and repair it. So it doesn't give you carte blanche power. It just lets you move in case of emergency. So all that's really in place right now is the area for public safety so that you don't get injured. And I know you don't agree with that, but when the experts say this, the plug is not stable, we have a responsibility to tell citizens it isn't somewhere you should go to take samples or do other things. It's not to impinge on your rights, okay?
My question is, when the plug is deemed not a threat, is it a state of emergency, is it taken off? That's what I want to know.
Right now, yes, that's what we would do.
As simple as that.
As simple as that.